Assalamu alaikum. Is the audio working now? Please let me know, inshallah. Sure, I will open it, inshallah. I'll open it right now. So, Assalamu alaikum. Just wanted to know, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Brother Akbar, Sheikh, can you hear me? So inshallah, I hope the audio is working. It should be working. It looks like it's working on my end. Um, if you can if we can just get a few users to confirm, and then I'll start the class, inshallah. Can anyone confirm? Audio is working. Okay, Jazakallah khair, brother. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين ثم أما بعد. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم: من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له طريقا إلى الجنة. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل يا رب العالمين. Inshallah ta'ala, today بإذن we'll be starting the chapter of As-Salam, and or in English called advance payment. And alhamdulillah, last week we've finished the chapter of Ar-Riba. We covered the chapter of Ar-Riba, and we went over the different types of Ar-Riba, the how Riba occurs, and the different types of mal or wealth that Riba can occur in. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll be covering As-Salam today. Just a comment. The brother asked, there was one brother that asked about the WhatsApp group to open it for others to be able to comment. I've opened it. However, the problem, what happens when I open it, a lot of people send forwards and they send unnecessary or information or messages that are not congruent with the group. So that's the issue, and that's the reason why I keep closing it. So I've opened it now for the brothers and sisters to ask questions. If there are any questions or any related messages to the class, please feel free to ask in the group, inshallah. However, please refrain from forwarding or from messaging unnecessary information in the group, and if that happens, I will be forced to close the group once again and just leave it open for announcements. So starting or continuing on our class, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Today, inshallah, we are covering the chapter of As-Salam. And As-Salam is something which is a haja or a necessity in our Sharia. It is something that makes transactions and a lot of business deals much easier. And there are many benefits of As-Salam, but first, before we get into the benefits of As-Salam, let's explain what As-Salam really is and the definitions of, or the definition of As-Salam from the ulama. So As-Salam is defined as عقد على موصوف في الذمة مؤجل بثمن مقبوض بمجلس العقد. So it is defined as an act, a contract, على موصوف في الذمة. So a contract based upon description, for a commodity owed in the future, في ذمة مؤجل بثمن مقبوض, which has been paid fully upfront at the time of the contract. مقبوض بمجلس العقد, at the time of the contract or at the place of the contract. So As-Salam essentially is a contract where the buyer pays the entire amount of money upfront, so he prepays the amount that he needs, the full amount of the commodity that he's purchasing, so he prepays it, and the contract is whatever, and the details in the contract must include the description of the product, must include the exact date when he's going to be getting, when he will take delivery of the commodity or the products, and must be very, very well described and have all the necessary information. But the main points, or the main pillars of As-Salam, is that the money must be paid up front, and it should be paid fully, and it should be for something which is described, not something that is a specified item. Now, this point here about a specific and a non-specific item is very important that you understand this. If you understand the concept of a specific item and a non-specific item in As-Salam, or in Bay' generally, in business transactions, in the fiqh of business transactions, it will make your understanding much easier. So when we talk about a specified item or a specified product, this means that you are pointing out, you are essentially selling something which is kind of saved, or it's something that is there already, and you know exactly which item you will buy. So for example, I say that I'm selling you the car that is in my driveway, my car that is in my driveway. That is something which is specified. Something which is not specified, which would be موصوف على في الذمة, would be something like, I am selling you, for example, I have a dealership of cars, and I have like maybe 10 or 15 Toyota Corolla cars. They're all the same exact color, same exact model, they're all brand new, and I say I'm selling you a Toyota Corolla brand new car, right? One of the many that I have, and you don't know exactly which one, and you can give him any Toyota Corolla as long as it fits the description, and that contract will be fulfilled. If you compare to the first example, I can only give him my car that's in my driveway for me to fulfill that contract. You can't give him any other car. So when we're talking about As-Salam, it must be something based on description, and it's a non-specified item. Non-specified mean that you can fulfill that contract with any item as long as it meets the general requirements mentioned in the contract. And it's not something which is specified. So it's not something which is special or unique. It's something which is general, which is, you can replicate it. There are many of them, right? So it's one of many, and it has to be one of many. It has to be this type of commodity, or this type of product, when we are doing a contract of As-Salam. So here we have, for example, Ali is selling dates. So he's selling, in this example, he says he's going to sell 5 kilos of dates, and the dates can be, he has a date farm, and he's selling 5 kilos of dates, and they will be from his farm or from his tree. And if he's not able to fulfill this contract with these dates, for example, on his tree, he's able to get these dates from anywhere else. Now, what is not allowed is for him to point out and to say, I am selling you this box of dates, this exact box of dates right here. That is what is not allowed. So he cannot say, I'm selling you this exact box of dates. However, he can say, I'm selling you 5 kilos of dates, and it comes from his farm, right? Or it comes from anywhere else. So specifying something that cannot be done in the contract of As-Salam. It has to be something which is one of many. There are many of them, and you're able to get it from here or from there or from another place. You can get that item. It's widely available in the market. And we'll come to the specific conditions of the scholars, inshallah ta'ala. So just to clarify in the definition, the scholars, when they so we spoke about specified and non-specified, which is the first part. في الذمة, so the second part, في الذمة, meaning that it is for a time in the future. So As-Salam, the contract of As-Salam, is usually done for something that's owed in the future, and not a contract that is done right away. However, there are some scholars, the majority of scholars, say that you are able, or you're allowed, it's permissible to do a Salam contract. Salam, they call it Salam al-Hal, or a contract which is a Salam, but you're selling it right away. You're not selling it in the future. So you're selling 5 kilos of dates based on the description, and you will deliver it maybe tomorrow or the next day. Or you deliver it, right now, right? Once he signs the contract, once he agrees, you'll get it to him right away, this afternoon, for example. Versus in the future, I'm selling you, 50 kilos of dates in the month of Ramadan, the Wahid Ramadan, the first of Ramadan, and I will deliver to you next Ramadan, right? That will be a Salam contract in the future. Mu'ajjalun. So we spoke about the first part. Aqtun ala mawsuf al-dhimma mu'ajjalun. Mu'ajjalun means paid in the future. Bi thamanin maqbood bi majlis al-aqd, meaning the amount is fully paid at the time of the contract and at the place of the contract, and it cannot be partially paid. However, the scholars have mentioned that if you partially pay for some commodity, for example, the entire lot is worth $100,000, you pay a down payment, for example, of $500,000, then your contract, your salam, is valid for that $500,000. Sorry, for that. The contract is worth $100,000, and you pay $50,000 down. So your contract, your salam agreement, in reality is worth $50,000, and you've paid for half of the items. And when the rest, when the next half of the items arrive, then you will pay the owner or you pay the seller at that time, and that's fine, inshallah. And also consignment agreements, where you pay after you sell the item. This is also something that the scholars have looked at, and they've said that it is permissible, inshallah ta'ala. So when you're, for example, you like a store owner would get items from a supplier, and the agreement would be, when my shop sells these items, then I will pay you, right? So you're basically like an agent with a consignment agreement, and that's something which is similar to this. You're paying at a later time, but you're taking possession you're taking possession right away. So we come to the evidence of As-Salam. Where has As-Salam? What is the evidence of As-Salam? And the evidences for As-Salam are in the Quran and in the Sunnah, and we can get the evidences from number one, the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu idha tadayantum bidaynin ila ajalin musamman faktubu. This ayah is in Surah Al-Baqarah. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu an, he says, okay, so to translate the ayah first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, O you who believe, when you contract a debt, or when you are writing a debt for a specific, when you're writing a contract for a debt, إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه, write it down. So when you contract a debt for a specific term, write it down. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh said about this ayah, he said, أشهد أن السلف المضمون إلى أجل مسمى قد أحل الله في كتابه وأذن فيه ثم قرأ هذه الآية. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh said that I bear witness, أشهد أن السلف المضمون, that السلف المضمون, meaning the Salam contract, إلى أجل مسمى, the contract that is for a specified time, talking about the Salam contract, قد أحل الله في كتابه, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it halal in his book, in the Quran. وأذن فيه, and he has permitted it. So he made it halal, and he has made an exception, or he has allowed it. ثم قرأ هذه الآية, and then he recited this ayah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he refers to this ayah in his explanation for the permissibility of As-Salam, or also known as As-Salaf. So the contract of As-Salam is also known in the books of Fiqh or as As-Salaf as well. Now, evidence from the Sunnah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh also narrates, and this is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh narrates that قدم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم المدينة. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم came to Medina. وهم يسلفون بالتمر سنتين وثلاثة. And the people, they used to have a salam contract, يسلفون بالتمر سنتين أو ثلاثة, 2 or 3 years. So they would pay in advance for their dates 2 or 3 years. قال من, and then the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, من أسلف في شيء ففي كيل معلوم ووزن معلوم إلى أجل معلوم. Whoever pays in advance the price of something to be delivered at a later time should pay it for a إلى أجل إلى في كيل معلوم, for a specified measure or volume, ووزن معلوم, or a specified weight, إلى أجل معلوم, for a specified period of time. So the scholars have taken from this hadith some of the things that need to be mentioned in the contract of As-Salam or As-Salaf. And here there are 3 things mentioned. Number 1 is the measure. So kail, which is a measurement of volume, or wazn, which is a measurement of weight, and the time. So the time period when you're going to be delivering the products. So this was known in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and they used to do this for 1 or 2 years in advance for dates. And we know that dates, they bear once a year, right? So they bear once a year. So it's not possible for you to have dates and then sell it 2 years in advance, unless like the dates will not be in existence at that time. That's what I'm trying to say. So they were selling something that was non-existent 2 or 3 years in advance, right? That's the point that needs to be made here. The second hadith or main hadith, which scholars mention, is a lengthier hadith, and I've only put the English here. This hadith is also in Sahih al-Bukhari, and Abdullah bin. So this hadith is narrated by Muhammad ibn Abi al-Mujallad, and they say Abu Buraida and Abdullah bin Shahid sent me to Abdur-Rahman ibn Abza, and Abdullah bin Abi Affa to ask them about As-Salam or As-Salaf. And they said, we used to get the war booty while we were with the Prophet ﷺ. And when the peasants of Asham, so when the people of Asham came to us, we used to pay them in advance for wheat, barley, oil, and oil to be delivered within a fixed period of time. I asked, did these peasants, did these people own the crops or not? And they replied, we never asked them about it. So here, this hadith is even more explicit and there's more ambiguity in the contract, or not in the contract, but in the actual buying, where they used to pay people from Asham. So they would pay people from a different country for products, and they didn't even know if they owned a garden or if they owned the crops to produce these, these things like the barley or the wheat. They didn't even know that. So this shows that for a salam contract, you don't need to own, the farm. For example, in the hadith before, we see that the farmers would sell their dates 2-3 years in advance. You don't need to own that farm. You don't need to own the factory. So typically, a salam is done. It could be done with a factory, like for example, a factory that produces cars. They would sell cars in advance before they, even are in existence. But they are a factory. They own that. They own that intellect and they own that power to make or manufacture the car. What if you're just a businessman and you want to sell something? You don't even own it, but you have the intention of going to buy it or going to get it. Perhaps you're going to make a factory, or perhaps you'll figure out a way to deliver these goods to that person. And a prime example of this in our time is drop shipping, right? A lot of people have been asking about this question. Is drop shipping halal? And if we look at the evidences here, this is probably the most explicit evidence to show that drop shipping indeed is something which is permissible. And it is something, for those of you that do not know what drop shipping is selling an item that you do not own. So you're selling something that you don't own, but you're selling it based on a description. So you open up a website, for example, you put pictures of the product, you put the description of the product. You may have a video, you may have all the different descriptions and the features of the product, but you don't own that item. What you do is a person clicks the buy now button, they purchase it, they enter their credit card details in, and they pay you. As soon as you get that money, you now go over to the manufacturer, whether it's in China or it's in a different country. You purchase that item and you send it to the buyer. And this is very, very similar to what this hadith that we just covered is something very, very similar to drop shipping. And the scholars have most of the scholars have permitted the permitted drop shipping, or the transaction of drop shipping as we know it today. So now we come to conditions of As-Salam. So what are the conditions that need to be mentioned in the contract? What are the things that must be that we must have in the contract, or every type of salam contract must have? So number one is, of course, the description. So the contract. So the contract. In the contract, you must accurately and precisely describe the product or anything which will affect the price the price of the items. So any type of description that will have a fluctuation in the price of that commodity, you must mention it in the description. So things, of course, like the volume, like if you're selling milk, you need to mention if it's 1 liters or 2 liters or 1,000 liters or 5,000 liters. You need to mention the amount, right? The volume. The quality, right? if you're selling milk, for example, you need to mention, is it goat milk? Is it sheep milk? Is it camel milk? Is it cow milk? You need to mention, nowadays days they use, for milk, they have the percentage. Is it pasteurized? Is it non-pasteurized? Is it organic? Is it all natural? Is it how much percentage of fat is in the milk? Right? All of these things which will have an effect on the price must be mentioned in the Salam contract. Similarly, if you're selling meat with a Salam contract, you have to mention the weight. You have to mention what type of animal it's coming from. Is it fresh? Is it lean meat? Etc. To the end of the list. You have to mention every single detail which will have an effect on the price. Things which will not have an effect on the price do not need to be mentioned. So if there's something that doesn't have an effect on the price, then it doesn't need to be mentioned. For example, if you're selling iPhones, for example, and there may be multiple factories of iPhones. One may be in California, another one may be in Tennessee, another one may be in Michigan, right? You don't have to mention the exact detail where that iPhone came from, because we all know that the Apple or the iPhone, it is something which is accepted, right? And it's something that people don't care where that factory is. It doesn't have an effect on the price. But of course, if you're selling iPhones, you must mention everything else that has an effect on the price, like the storage and the model and the color, etc. So As-Salam, as we mentioned earlier, is not allowed on things that are not identical or not alike. So for example, some of the scholars, they've mentioned that leather is something that you cannot do a salam on. And when they mention this, the older scholars have mentioned this in the classical books. So these days, if you have a factory that's producing leather which is exactly identical, and you can give a sample and you can produce that same exact sample, then you can leather something where you can do a salam on. But back in the days, in the classical days, where the scholars would write, the classical older scholars have mentioned that leather is something you cannot do a salam, because leather will always come out different whenever you dry leather and whenever you kind of finish it by hand. Also, they've mentioned that utensils, right? So utensils like spoons and cups and these type of things. But the scholars mention nowadays, since they are made with a factory and they're made precisely and they're made very, very identical, then you can do a salam with utensils. Also, this from what things are not that are not allowed, the scholars have mentioned in the past pregnant animals. So pregnant animals cannot be sold for or in a salam contract. However, animals that are not pregnant, for example, sheep, cow, horses, these animals are allowed to be sold on a salam contract, and there is evidence from the sunnah to support this. However, pregnant animals, because of the gharar, because of the uncertainty, you don't know what's in that animal. Is it going to be a male animal, a female animal? Is the animal going to come out alive, or will it be dead when it comes out? You don't know, right? So you don't know the exact value of that animal. So therefore, you cannot sell, or you cannot sell animals on a salam contract which are pregnant. Another or other items which the scholars have mentioned, the classical scholars, they've mentioned mixed perfumes. So mixed perfumes, because you do not know exactly how much of each perfume you're putting in, and every time you mix the perfume, it might come out with a different smell, a different scent, right? Just a little bit, a tiny bit more of one liquid or one type of perfume may change the smell of the perfume a tremendous amount. But they've also the modern scholars, the scholars of this age, have mentioned that if it's something that's made in the factory, then it is permissible to sell in the contract of As-Salam. Also creams in the past, they would make them by hand, and they would you would not be able to make the same exact cream 2 or 3 times in a row, right? It would be very difficult. But now, since we have factories that are able to make creams very identical, then this is something which is permitted, inshallah ta'ala, if you're making it at a factory. So as long the rule is as long as you're able to produce that item in a factory, and it's the exact identical version of that item, then you're allowed to do a salam for that particular commodity. Also, from the things that you are allowed to do a salam, from what the scholars have mentioned, you are allowed to do a salam on live animals. So we mentioned animals. So live animals, you're allowed to do a salam. The meat of an animal, so you can do the salam for the meat of an entire animal. You can do salam for the meat of a specific part of an animal. So, for example, you eat chicken legs every single day. So you make a contract with a butcher to supply you one chicken leg every single day for 1 month. So you pay him up front and you say, look, I need a contract. I'm reserving one chicken leg every single day for 30 days, and he delivers one chicken leg to you every single day. So a part of a body of an animal. This is permitted as well. Number 2 is the category and the variant. So when you're doing a contract of a salam, you must mention both the category and the variant. So for example, if you're selling grains, you cannot just say I will be delivering you grains in 1 month and it will be 5 tons, etc. to the end of it. You have to mention what type of grains they are that you're selling, right, or that you're buying. So the grains, you have to say, is it going to be barley, or is it wheat, or is it going to be chickpeas, whatever type of grains you will be selling, then you must mention it in the contract. So you must mention you can mention the category, which is grains, and then you must mention the variant, which will be the exact type of grain you are selling. And if you mention just the variant, so for example, you mention wheat, then that's enough. You don't need to mention the category, that you don't need to mention that I'm selling you grains. You can say wheat, and that will be sufficient, inshallah ta'ala. The third condition of a salam contract is mentioning the weight, volume, or the amount in measure when you are selling something. So we mentioned this before. For weight, for example, if you're selling cotton, for example, you may sell 1 ton of cotton. If you're selling milk, you would sell it by volume. You would say 1 liter or 2 liters or 5 liters or 50 liters. If you're selling cloth, you would sell it by measure. So 1 yard, 2 yards, 5 meters, 3 meters, etc. So the amount of measure or weight or volume must be mentioned in the contract. The fourth condition is mentioning of the price and the time of delivery. So you must mention the price, the exact price, how much is being paid, and the exact time of delivery must be mentioned and must be specified in the contract as well. Number 5 is the commodity must have availability at the time of delivery. So the commodity must be something that is widespread in that area at the time of delivery. And if it is something that is rare or something that is not allowed in that particular country or that particular time, then it should not be. You are not allowed to make a contract of a salam on it. So, for example, the scholars mention, and this is again the fuqaha, the older classical scholars, they mentioned that selling dates in the winter time is not allowed, is not permitted. Why is that? Because dates typically bear in the season of July, August, in the summertime. And in the wintertime, dates do not bear. Dates only bear once a year. However, the fuqaha have mentioned if you have the ability to deliver the item in that time. So for example, now, alhamdulillah, we have technology, we have refrigeration, and we're able to deliver dates in winter, then you are allowed to do a salam contract on that. Similarly, some scholars have mentioned cucumbers in the time of winter. You're not allowed to sell cucumbers in the time of winter on a salam contract. But if you have the ability, for example, you own an import or export company, or you have connections with import-export companies, and you are able to import the cucumbers from a country which is able to bear those cucumbers and grow those cucumbers in in the wintertime where you are in, then this is perfectly fine. If you are confident that you're able to get those products at that time, then you're allowed. It is permitted for you to make a salam contract on this product, inshallah ta'ala. So an example of something that is not permitted is, for example, if there is a prohibition in the time of in the place of delivery. So, for example, there may be some sort of items which are not allowed in some countries. So, some countries, for example, in some countries, um, you may not you may not be able to sell a particular item, like nutmeg, for example, um, is not available in Saudi Arabia, or in some parts of Saudi Arabia. Nutmeg cannot be found, and uh, so in this case, if you're not able to if you're not able to to deliver it, if the country has prohibited it, then you're not allowed to do a salam on that particular item. And the reason why is because nutmeg uh, is considered a drug, or can be turned into a drug, which can get people intoxicated. That is why nutmeg is not allowed in Saudi Arabia, or it was not allowed. Allahu alam, if the law has changed now. But I know from previous experience that nutmeg was something that you're not able to find in Saudi Arabia, and people have spoken about this. So now, what happens if the if you make a contract of a salam and you're not able to deliver for some reason or another? So if you're not able to deliver, you as a seller, you're not able to deliver. You've collected the money, and now you're not able to deliver the goods. What happens? So the buyer has two options. Number one, he can have a sabr, he can have patience with you until you are able to deliver those items. Number two, if he does not want to wait, then he can nullify the contract and get a full refund, or he can get a partial refund, whatever he wants. For example, a partial refund would work if, for example, the seller is able to fulfill part of that contract. So he's able to give you half of what you've paid for instead of the full amount. Then you can get a partial refund. So you can either request a full refund if you haven't gotten anything, or a partial refund if you've gotten everything. If you've gotten partial goods. Now, if, for example, you've requested a large amount, and a small amount, a quarter of the amount that you need is not going to suffice you. You're not going to be able to do business with just a few hundred kilos of dates, for example, right? Because you are a person that supplies many venues, and you need a lot of dates to do business. So if a person, for example, you had a contract of 10,000 kilos of dates, and he only gives you 1,000 kilos, right? That's not going to help you, right? So in that case, you can request a full refund. If the amount that he's going to give you, it won't have an effect. It won't even benefit you. So you can just not accept anything. And if it's better for you just to not accept anything and just get your money back, then that is something that you can do as well. So the sixth condition is the exchange of the full price must be paid at the time of the contract before the two parties depart. So it has to be done in the majlis al-aqd, so in the time or in the place of the contract. And as we said earlier, if a partial price is transferred, then the contract is valid for that proportionate amount of goods. So as we said before, if only 50% is paid at the time of the contract, then the salam contract is valid for 50%. So the seller, technically, he only needs to deliver 50%, right? You're only qualified, or you're only you're only reserving 50% of those. If he wants to sell that other 50% to someone else, he has the right to do so. So if you want to make sure that you reserve all of your goods, then you should pay for all of the money, all of the amount, so that the entire lot is reserved for you. And finally, the last condition is the products must be delivered at the place of the contract if not otherwise specified. So usually in the contract you should um, specify where you want the products to be delivered, and if it's not specified, then the asl is that it is delivered at the place where the contract took place. And this is what the scholars have mentioned. Now, what are some of the wisdoms of As-Salam? So the scholars have mentioned that this As-Salam contract, one of the hikmah, or some of the hikmah from the Salam contract is, one, it benefits the buyers, because usually when a person is paying in advance, he's prepaying, he will get a better bargain, a better deal. So for example, if ajwa dates are 50 riyals a kilo in the market, and you are paying in advance, he may give it to you for 30 riyals a kilo, or 40 riyals a kilo for what is worth 50 riyals. If another benefit or wisdom is that it benefits the sellers, as they get upfront cash uh, that they may need to finance their business. So a lot of sellers, especially farmers, and this is also from the hikmah, the haja, the need of the farmers and the need of some people to finance their business. So farmers, as we know, they only are able to get money, uh, once their crops have ripened. So they need to keep spending and spending and spending on employees and on watering the farm and fertilizing and maintaining their farm. They have to keep spending and spending, and they may not have all that money to spend throughout the entire year, especially if you're farming dates. Dates only reap once a year. So for the entire year, for 10 months out of 12 months, you're spending money, and you need to spend for your family. You need to spend for you need money for to support your family, to support the farm, etc. So them getting money up front for goods helps them, so they're able to spend on their family, they're able to spend on their farm, and that way they're able to give you a lower price as well. So you're helping them and they are helping you, and it kind of coexists in that kind of nice ecosystem where everyone helps each other and everyone benefits at the end of the day. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll finish with this today. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Next week, inshallah, we will cover the chapter of al-qard, or the chapter of loans. Inshallah, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat, either in the YouTube chat, or if you'd like to ask in the WhatsApp group as well, you can do so. I'll stay on for another 5 minutes, inshallah, and then if there are no questions, I will end the stream. So I don't see any questions. I'll wait for another few minutes, inshallah. I've so for the WhatsApp group, I've changed the settings. So okay, let me just make sure. Let me just change settings again. Send messages. Okay. Sorry, I've changed the settings now to open it for all anyone that would like to ask any questions or put any comments in there, inshallah. Please, only relevant comments, inshallah. Okay, I don't see any questions. Inshallah, I will end here. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Are you planning to send us the notes? Yes, I know I've been lacking or slacking on the notes. Inshallah, I'll update the notes. I have to update the notes and send them to you all, inshallah ta'ala. Bi'idhnillah, this week I will update the notes, inshallah, and send you all an updated notes. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Inshallah, we will continue next week at the same time, 7 p.m. Inshallah ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.